Hi, welcome to Auntie Joe's Kitchen. Today we're going to be making chicken soup, okay? This was a highly requested recipe that I received from several people that I know. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I like to make chicken soup. I prefer to use dark meat, so we're going to be using chicken thighs as our base. It's a more flavorful meat than using white meat. Sometimes I like to take some chicken thighs and add some chicken breasts to it just to get a different variety of flavors, but most of the time I just like to use chicken thighs. So I'm going to show you how I get those started, and then we're going to move on. So the first tools you're going to need is a cutting mat. I like to get these kits. I usually get them off Amazon for like $12 or so, and they come with different cutting mats for different kinds of meat, some with vegetables and stuff. You can buy different amounts all the time. I like this one here is for chicken. You can see it has the chicken logo on it, so it's used only for chicken and turkey. So we're going to use that. Then you're going to want a really good knife. I like to use a good chef knife. This is a Tramontina. It's one of my favorite knives to use. And then I have my Amusapa. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I apologize to any Hispanics in the audience. But this is a really good pan for cooking soups and stuff. It's nice and big. There's a lot of area for stirring, but it's also thin and it tends to cook a little faster. And of course we have our chicken thighs. I got these at Aldi's. Aldi's is a really great place if you want to get good affordable meats and stuff like that, but always check your local supermarket flyers. You never know what kind of sales you're going to hit there. So let's go ahead and get started by cleaning up our chicken thighs. The first thing you're going to want to do is obviously wash your hands, and you're also going to want to remove any jewelry you have. I recommend taking off bracelets, but definitely rings, because rings will like to trap different bacterias and different types of germs that are not good. And if you don't take the rings off, even if you wash your hands afterwards, the germs and stuff can collect up underneath the bands. My wedding ring in particular has little indentations and filigree design in it, and I do not want that to trap any kind of germs like salmonella and stuff. So make sure you take off all your jewelry, okay? So let's go ahead and do that, and then we're going to go ahead and clean up our chicken. And we're going to rinse it off with some cold water, okay? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and cut into our chicken. Get right in there. I like to use a lot of chicken in mine because I like a lot of chicken. It's just me. So we're going to go ahead and get into that. We're going to remove some of the fat, but we're not going to remove all of it because the fat is where a lot of your flavor and your flavor stock is going to come from. So we're just going to trim a little bit off just so that it's a little cleaner. We'll go ahead and cut this one in half, just so it's a little easier to manage in the pan. Get this little bit too. There's a little bit here. We can go ahead and remove. Always make sure you're using a sharp knife too. Dull knives are the worst enemy for cooking because dull knives, they will just cut you way worse than a sharp knife will. So we're just going to continue just trimming up a little bit of our fat and stuff. Okay. Okay, so now we have our chicken over here. I'm going to go ahead and get some nice cold water going. We're just going to rinse each piece, pop it on a nice clean plate so it doesn't pick up the germs from the cutting board that we used. So you don't need to go crazy on it. You're just kind of getting off any kind of sliminess or things of that nature. And you're going to have little loose pieces like this when you're using chicken thighs. It's just part of the game. So we'll just kind of wash each piece. And then these little pieces that want to fall off. Always make sure you clean your sink really well after working with chicken. The salmonella does get everywhere. So we're just going to drain out that water. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and get it ready in our pot. Okay, so now that we got our chicken all prepped and ready to go, we're just going to cook it in whole pieces because we're gonna shred it up later for the chicken soup. So we're gonna pop it all right in here in the pan. And remember, you do want some of that fat because the fat is where the flavor comes from. Especially if you want to use the homemade chicken stock and stuff, which is what I'm going to do with this, okay? So anytime you're doing anything with chicken, if you use a towel, a washcloth, make sure you're going ahead and putting it in your wash. You do not want to reuse it. Okay, now here you see our pot of chicken. Okay, we're going to go ahead and fill it up with some cold water. I did clean down the sink from after doing the washing. So you want to make sure you're always being very clean when it comes to chicken. So we're just filling that up and just testing how deep it is. Now I may go ahead and switch this to a deeper pot when I go to make the actual soup, but this will do a nice job of getting the chicken ready. Okay, here we have our pot of chicken. I've moved it over to the stove. We're gonna go ahead and turn this on to a nice high flame to get it boiling. And that's how we're gonna cook the chicken down for our meal. And then once it's ready, we'll go ahead and shred it up and get the vegetables and stuff. So now that we have our chicken on the stove cooking in our cold water, you're gonna need the other ingredients for chicken soup, okay? You got your celery, okay? You're gonna need that. Some whole carrots, which we're gonna peel and cut. And of course, you're gonna want a nice good sized onion, okay? And again, you're gonna want your cutting board things. This one's for vegetables. As you can see, it has the lettuce in the corner. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. Make sure you have a good knife for it. So we're gonna go ahead and start peeling the carrots, and I'll show you how to cut an onion, and then we'll be going on to the next step. Okay, so I went ahead and peeled the carrots and got those all done. To do that, you're gonna need a nice vegetable peeler. I'll just take your carrots, just go down them, and just get all the skin off, okay? So that's what I did while I was off camera. So now I'm going to show you how to go ahead and cut up the carrots and the celery and the onion for the soup, okay? Sometimes I like to cheat with carrots if I'm making something in a hurry. So you can actually buy carrots that are already cut in like little round discs already. Sometimes I will cheat and do that, but they are more expensive. And these definitely are a little bit more flavorful because they're not as treated. They're fresh right out of the ground. So I'm gonna go ahead now and show you how to cut all these down, okay? As you can see, I have my setup here. I have my vegetables. I have a bowl for my cut vegetables. I have my garbage can here to put pieces into. So we're gonna go ahead and start cutting these up. Okay, so you're just gonna cut the tops right off and cut the bottoms right off. You don't need to lose a lot, okay? And then you're just gonna go ahead and just start making little round discs, okay? Now, I am not a professional chef. I'm just somebody who loves to cook and has been cooking all my life. So I did not go to culinary school, so I'm sure that my chopping skills look atrocious to those who did, but it gets the job done. So you want them kind of about that big. So you want them a little thin, but you don't want them too thin that they just wilt in the water, okay? When I get to the bigger ones, where you get like a bigger piece like this, I'm gonna go ahead and cut it in half, lengthwise, so that way we get some smaller pieces, and then we'll just go ahead and cut those down. So that's what I like to do with bigger carrots. I tend to look for bags that have more skinny carrots in them, unless I'm doing like a roast or something, okay? So that's how you're gonna do your carrots, okay? So I will come back when you're ready to do celery and onion, okay? Okay, you can see we got our carrots all cut up here, okay? Nice little circles. Now your celery should be roughly the same ratio to your carrots, roughly. So we're gonna go ahead and pop this open. Okay, first thing you're gonna wanna do is go ahead and cut off the bottom. Remember when you were a kid and you used to take these and make little rose stamps out of them? Always fun. Okay. Now we're gonna go ahead and cut the tops off. Get rid of all that junk. Now we're going to figure out what we want to use. Now, when it comes to soups and cooking, you want to use your rougher pieces that are on the outside for soups and stuff, because that's what they're better for. For eating, you want to go more towards your inside, because those are more crunchier, they're a little more flavorful, and they're a little more of a softer type of flavor. So we're going to go ahead and pull some of these more green stalks out. So I did roughly about 7 carrots. And I'm going to tell you now, I do not measure anything I really cook. I cook by sight and taste. So we're going to go ahead and just get some of these bigger stems. I don't like the way this one looks, so we're going to toss that one. Okay, again, this one doesn't look that good, so we'll toss that. Okay, we'll do one more. All right. Now these nice inside ones, you're going to want those for some flavor. So we're going to trim those down along with this one here. So we're going to take these tops here. That's a lot of good soup flavor right here, these celery leaves, okay? But we're going to save these and go ahead and we'll use them for eating and stuff. This is always my favorite part. This is the soft, soft center. So eat that right up. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get rid of this guy too. And these I will clean up further and I will put away, and I'll show you how to do that to save your extra, okay? Put this off to the side. Now we're going to take these over to the sink and we're going to wash these up, get all this dirt, these old leaves, things like that out of there, okay? Okay, so now we have our celery all washed and cleaned, okay? And you just use a nice vegetable brush. I'll show you the one I have here. It's just a nice vegetable brush. These are some stiffer bristles for harsher cleaning and softer ones here. So it works great for these kind of things. So now you're just going to cut these up the same way that you would cut up carrots. So again, you're going to just go right in there and just make nice little half moon shaped discs. And like I said, I am not a professional chef, so please, you know, I just like to cook. So, and I like to teach other people how to cook and make different things. And of course, you're going to have that happen. Some of them like to fall in different spots. That's pretty much all you're going to do with your celery, okay? Now, I'll come back and show you how to do the onion next. Okay, so we have all of our celery cut up and it's in here with our carrots. It's all going in the pot at the same time, so it doesn't matter if you go ahead and put it in the same bowl. So now I'm going to show you how to cut an onion. And it's okay to use the mat over and over because, again, all these flavors are going into the soup, so you don't really need to get a new cutting mat with everything that you're cutting, or a new knife. So get your onion, get this squishy kind of skin off of it because it'll be easier to cut. Okay, and you get down to around like that. And then what you're going to do is you're going to cut the bottom off. Okay, toss that. You're going to cut the other side off. Toss that. Then you're going to take your knife and you're going to do a very slight cut through the first layer, just like that, into your onion. Then you're going to come over here and take that nice first layer right off. And it just pops right out. Okay? And there you have your onion all ready to cut. Now, since you've already got an indentation here, that's where I'm going to go ahead and cut into the center. So we're going to cut right into the center. And then you're going to turn it over. And then you're going to cut it into thinner pieces, like that. Okay? So you can see that now we have thin indentations, thin cuts all the way through. Then you're going to go ahead and turn it sideways, and you're going to kind of go at an angle, and you're going to just start cutting it right up like that. And that's basically how you dice an onion. Now, it's always fun when you get down to these smaller pieces because you don't want to cut yourself. So always got to be a little careful. Sometimes you got to cut up some bigger pieces afterwards. So, but you just keep doing that. Just make your nice indentations. Onions rarely make me cry. A lot of people, they do. The best way around that is to put a matchstick between your teeth, because it all comes down to what you're smelling. Another way you can do it is to heat the blade up over an open flame, and it will cut the smell right in half. And take your onion, pop it in your bowl. Okay. Now, we have these celery leaves we saved. And this is a lot of flavor right here, and it's great in your soup, okay? Now, this is not a good knife to be doing herbs with. So we're going to get this guy. He's a little bit better for that. And we're just going to go in and cut up these leaves. And just kind of turn them. And then go over them again. Kind of get them cut up a little fine. But this is a lot of really good flavor for your soup. All that good celery flavor. So we're going to go ahead and pop that into our bowl. Okay. That's pretty much all the vegetables you're going to need to go ahead and make your chicken soup. When the chicken is done, I will show you the next step. And we're going to go ahead and get water on to start boiling noodles. Okay, so had to take a break, feed the husband, all that stuff. So my chicken is done. I cooked it for about 45 minutes. So that's what you want to do, is boil it and let it boil down so you're getting the chicken stock. So I'm going to show you what that looks like, and we're going to start taking the chicken apart. Okay, so I got my cutting board out. This one has a nice indented groove, which is good for catching juices and things off of meats. That's what I tend to like to use this one for. And you can see our chicken here. It looks a little dry on top because I turned it off for about a half an hour because I had to feed my husband. So, but you can see all this stock down here on the bottom. That is what we want for our base for our chicken soup, okay? That's what the fat and stuff gives you. That's all your flavor. So we're not going to toss anything that's in there. So now I'm going to show you about getting this all ready. So of course, wash your hands before you do anything. I did that before we started. So, and you can see that the chicken has kind of shrunk up. So that's why I said I like to cook it all when I buy it, because it does tend to shrink. So like these smaller pieces will just break up. Okay, got these smaller pieces here. You can do this with bone chicken as well, but there is an extra step you have to take when you boil it down. You have to actually sit there and pick it off the bone and stuff, and you do run the risk of bone getting into your soup, and that can be dangerous for people, so I don't tend to really use boned chicken. But if I have it left over from a roast chicken or something, I will debone it before I do anything else. Now, these are really handy. These are meat shredders. I don't know what the technical name is. Maybe that's what the technical name is, but it comes in real handy for this because you can get right in there and just rip your chicken apart into nice pieces and get kind of fine into it. Just kind of get in there, rip all your chicken up. Just makes things a lot easier than sitting there and cutting with a knife. But you can do this with a knife or your fingers or whatever you want to do. I'm going to break these up into smaller pieces for the soup, but this gets the biggest parts out of the way. These are really good tools if you're doing pulled pork or shredded beef or anything like that, which I will show you some meals and stuff that I do with pork and stuff like that, and these types of shredders, come in really handy for that kind of stuff. So we will come back. I'm going to go ahead and break all this up, and I will show you what our next step is. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and cook down our soup. So I've got all my spices and stuff ready, and I got our vegetables, and let's get going. Okay, so turn on our stove, get on high for right now. Okay, and let's add in our vegetables. Get right in there, get all this in there, all of our celery leaves, our onions and everything. Grab our spoon and get this all stirred up. Now you're going to want some extra broth like I'm showing you here because we're going to be having noodles. Obviously it's chicken noodle soup. So, okay. Now seasoning is the big part. Before we do that though, we're going to add in our last little ingredient. Now some people use a whole tomato in chicken soup. I just like to use tomato paste because I am allergic to raw tomatoes. So I am very careful about my usage of tomatoes. So tomato paste I find works just as good. And you don't have all the seeds and the skin and everything. So I just get a little tiny can of tomato paste and it does the same thing. And just scrape that out. Okay, we don't want to waste any, so we're going to clean off our spoon. Okay, now I am very Italian and I come from a very Italian family. So our go-to for everything is garlic. So I'll get a nice, good size spoonful there. Dump that in. We may add more, who knows. Okay, now we're gonna need some salt. So we're gonna go ahead and shake some of that in here. Gotta be careful because we have saltines in here to keep it from clumping. So we're gonna add some salt. And like I said, I don't measure anything. And then we got some pepper. I like the restaurant grade pepper because it's a richer flavor. So we're gonna shake in a good healthy dosage of that. Remember, you're making a whole pot. Okay. So let's get those ingredients mixed in. Okay, and I do everything by taste. So we're gonna grab my garlicky spoon here and we're gonna see. Okay, we got a good flavor. The salt tastes good. So we're gonna add some thyme. We're giving a nice healthy dose. I usually do a layer right over the top of what I'm cooking. We're gonna add some parsley. Sometimes I'll use fresh parsley. I just didn't pick any up this time. We are going to add some rubbed sage. I prefer the rubbed over the powdered. And then we're going to finally add some rosemary. And that one takes a little longer to come out because it's bigger pieces. Okay, now we're going to stir all this in. You see that tomato sauce is really bringing up that broth color. You're getting that nice orangey broth, which is really good. Stir this in really good so all those flavors mingle. So now we're going to test it again. And because I'm cooking at home, yes, I'm using the same spoon. but that's because I'm cooking for me and my family. If I was having guests over, it'd be different. And that is a really good flavor. But I think I want it a little sweeter. Sometimes the tomato will give you enough sweetness, but because I don't use a whole tomato, I don't get the sweetness. So we're going to add just a little bit of sugar to take the place of the natural sweetness that a regular tomato would have. Things you have to do when you have food allergies. So that'll just give it a little bit of a perk up, get a little touch of sweetness. And that is good. So we don't need to add anything else. Okay. So what we're going to do now, I know that ring light looks horrible on my glasses. So now what we're going to do is let it cook down. We're going to let it come to a boil. Then we're going to turn it down to a medium range. And we're going to put a lid on it. And we're just going to let it simmer for a while. And just let all those flavors mingle right in. Okay? Okay, as you can see, we have a nice rolling boil going. So we're going to take our spoon. And of course, all of the spices like to float to the top. So you got to kind of stir them back in. So now that it's at a nice boil, we're going to go ahead and turn it down to a nice medium flame. Okay, and now we're just going to let it cook down. And when you're all done, your soup should look like that. Now, off screen, I did boil some water and cook the noodles. When I store these, I like to store the noodles separate from the soup, only because that way the noodles don't suck up all the broth, which they do have a tendency to do, and the noodles also will get kind of wilty. So it's always best to just store them separate, I found at least. And now the finished product. I like to top my chicken soup with Parmesan cheese. It really adds a depth to the flavor as well as the saltiness. So I highly recommend it you give it a try on your next go. And that's how you make chicken noodle soup. So check me out next week for our next video. This is Auntie Jo. Talk to you soon.